Aecius built a scheme that bound many barbarian kingdoms into an alliance under Rome. With no decent army, no gold, no bread, all Aecius could boast of was authority and working arrangements. Perhaps he thought himself indispensable. The emperor did not think so he preferred to get rid of the warlord who claimed power. History has shown that Valentinian was wrong. In the provinces, the news of the death of Aecius was received with horror. The order that he brought completely collapsed. Valentinian, perhaps, did not even think that now nothing more does not hold back the Goths, Franks, Alemanni, Burgundians, and Vandals. All he did was to continue drinking mixed with fervent prayers for the salvation of his soul. Meanwhile, the active Maxim continued his subversive activities. In 6 months he managed to embed in the guard of the emperor 2 of his men, and the plan was put into action. During a military parade on the Mars field, 2 barbarians from the guard of the emperor slaughtered Heraclius, after which immediately slaughtered Valentinian, with the full acquiescence of the rest of the retinue. So, over the body of the defeated emperor stood Petronius Maximus, a 60-year-old politician. Almost all his life held important positions in the state. Maximus twice managed to be consul, was in charge of tax collection, was prefect of Rome, in which he repaired St. Peter's Basilica, was prefect of Italy. Having thoroughly prepared for the coup, he managed to mint a lot of gold and silver coins, which were going to buy the army and the Senate. But alas, the first day of his reign was the last happy day of his career. Ascending the throne of the emperor, Maximus felt the horror of his position. He was not supported by the army, he did not enjoy the respect of the barbarian kings, his rights to the throne was not recognized in the eastern part of the empire. Even the throne he simply bought from the Senate, and the common people in Rome absolutely did not perceive the new emperor without festivals and distribution of bread. The emperor was unable to provide the townspeople with games and food. The palace seemed to him a prison, and to his friend Fulgentius, the emperor admitted that he felt the sword of Damocles of fate hanging over him. However, to the best of his ability, he tried to remedy his situation. Before anything bad happened, Maximus sent a letter appointing Marcus Merzelius Avitus as commander in Gaul. Avitus was an associate of Aecius and had spent many years at the court of the Visigoths as an advisor to the king. So by appointing him to the army of Gaul, Maximus was trying to gain the loyalty of the Visigoths and the entire province. Avitus has left. That, however, has not led to obedience legions. All commanders of armies in empire delayed with Maximus's recognition as emperor, so there was a paradoxical situation. At emperor, there was no army. Legions were engaged in guarding the border and protecting the population in their locations. But the emperor could not actually order them to do anything. In order to strengthen the rights to the throne and to be related to the family of the Eastern emperor, Maximus married the widow of Valentinian, Licinia. The daughter of Valentinian, Eudocia, he thought up to give out for the son Palladius, to maximize the inbreeding with the previous dynasty. Nevertheless, it has only strengthened rumors and speculations that Maximus has killed emperor because of criminal passion to his wife. Moreover, the murderers of Valentinian were not punished, and when Maximus himself tried to convince Licinia of his love and confessed that he had always had feelings for her, it finally strengthened the woman in the understanding that she was possessed by a murderer. In May came the news that a fleet of Vandals was advancing from Carthage. Their aim was nothing less than Rome. The inhabitants of the city, which by that time, according to various estimates, remained already less than 100,000, began to leave the capital en masse. The emperor, floundering between the news of uprisings of garrisons and barbarians, between the turmoil in the family and the country, could only wait to see where this campaign would lead and hope that he would somehow manage to pay off the pirate king. Everyone who could hide from the approaching barbarians in the province had already left the city, and on the evening of May 31st, 455, the city was unusually noisy, reminding the emperor of the days of his youth when Rome was populated by hundreds of thousands of citizens. The sounds of the city contrasted with the unusual silence in the palace, and made it hard for the emperor to concentrate. At dinner time, he officially dismissed all courtiers and servants, and most rushed to their homes and families. Maxime did not give any more instructions about defending the city or restoring order. After half a day of wasted walking around the palace, he silently went outside, hoping that the fresh air would allow him to gather his thoughts somehow. The few passers-by stopped and began to ask him questions. "Officials are fleeing the city. Who will distribute the bread? Where are Caesar's legions? Where are the federals? How will you stop the Vandals?" Maximus sighed heavily and quickened his step. His guards frowned and put their hands on the hilt of their swords. How do you stop the Vandals? There was no solution to this problem. Only force could stop the barbarians. But the generals in the provinces remained silent, and one could only wonder what would satisfy the cruel pirate. Rome is still huge, thought Maximus. Even if he takes all he can, there will be more left. We'll negotiate, make an agreement. Maybe Gaiseric will be satisfied with titles and territories, Spain or Sicily. Stop, Maximus. Stop and answer the people's question. The emperor did not stop, already regretting that he had left the palace. But then a stone thrown by someone hit him in the back. Maximus turned around and froze with a gasp of surprise. Everywhere around him, the furious citizens began to pick up the cobblestones that had been knocked off the edge of the road. Emperor of the Roman Empire, lord of the greatest country that ever existed, the man responsible for the fate of people from the icy seas of the north to the sandy seas of the African desert, he could not even imagine that his fate would be decided not by the Senate, not by the army, not by a treacherous relative, but by a group of hungry, frightened ragamuffins on an evening street. One of the first stones mercifully struck him in the temple. The world went dark, and the emperor's body collapsed to the sidewalk. The guards scrambled aside. The eunuchs who had been following in the distance pressed themselves against the wall and watched panic-stricken as one of the Romans approached Maximus and threw a heavy stone at him, then began to move quickly away, pushing the inhabitants who had pounced on the body. The breathless, tortured body was dragged down the street past the Bull Forum before being carried to the Aemilia Bridge and tossed into the hospitable Tiber, not far from where the sewage flows into the river through the main sewer pipe, the great cloaca of Rome. The emperor was dead, but there was no one to shout congratulations. Passers-by, those who had no friends or property in the province, scattered into the streets, placing their fates in the hands of higher powers. The Senate scattered. There was no one left in the city who could do the organizing except the much-experienced Pope, the famous Leo I. Once again, the priest was left to grieving political concerns. 3 days later, the motley band of Gaiseric approached the Eternal City. After the news of the emperor's death, the scouts of the Vandal king reported the absence of any enemy troops, and the African pirates began their march on the city, tantalizing with untold treasures. To the right of the moving army, the ships that had been bringing goods from all corners of the earth to the capital for centuries were slowly ascending the Tiber. Now they were on a mission to take from Rome to Carthage whatever the plunderers wished to take. Dark-skinned Berbers, black Africans, tanned russet Germans, black-bearded Alans, Gaiseric's flock marched down the road. The city was doomed. Vandalism has forever entered human history as a term that describes the wanton destruction or defacement of works of art and architecture. The Vandals didn't actually engage in destruction and arson. The 2 weeks they spent in Rome are remembered only for the business-like devastation of the city, as the barbarians scouring houses and palaces picked out anything that seemed valuable, right down to the brassware. Whether Arian or pagan, they did not consider it shameful to rob churches. They took relics of the ancient gods from old sealed temples, and relics taken from the vaults to Carthage, once taken from the Jews in Solomon's temple. Knowing the value of cultural objects, they removed from the capital beautiful statues, which Gaiseric decided to decorate his capital, Carthage. The king's attention was drawn to the roof of the capital, and his soldiers went to dismantle the copper plates covered with gold, having managed to remove most of it before sailing. For 2 weeks, no one stopped the barbarians from going about their business. No armies were assembled anywhere. No one called on the Federates or Constantinople. The Vandals did not kill, but but captured everyone they met as slaves, taking all the noble Romans with them, rightly believing that they represented a good commodity for further ransom. The wife of Emperor Maximus also sailed to Africa. Her daughter, once promised as a bride to the son of Haeseric, was finally obtained for the heir to the Vandal throne. The Vandal fleet finally left Rome and sailed back safely, losing only one ship overloaded with statues. The shame and horror of what happened was so great that none of the contemporaries left a description of what happened. After the few Romans returned to their city, they found themselves in an empty, abandoned city, completely and finally lost its greatness, importance, and wealth. There was no army, no emperor. The senators were busy ransoming relatives and friends from Africa. The inhabitants began to rebuild their homes, and for them the sermons about the imminent end of the world in the churches never sounded so convincing as in this black period of the city's history.